What's up, fantasy managers? My name's Tom and I'm back talking about F1 fantasy. This is my team selection video for Japan, and there is plenty to talk about for the Japanese team selection. Do we continue down the budget building road? Are we all in on points? How do we balance the two? What is the pricing algorithm? We'll be discussing all those things in a minute. Also, we've got to discuss about Yuki Tsunoda, Liam Lawson shenanigans from Red Bull. How's that going to affect things? We will get into that in just a couple of minutes, but given that it's race week 3 we're coming into now, we've only had 2 race weeks. It is already the second violin segment of the season, so please spare a couple of minutes of your time to reflect upon those fantasy managers that have suffered greatly at the hands of the multiple disqualifications we saw in China. I asked the question, did you suffer from the disqualifications? Tom Thorne, with the 3 times on Lewis Hamilton, says yes. Valerie submitted this provisional points of 133 after taking a minus 10 for transfers. The caption, pain, fairly encapsulates a lot of fantasy managers' feelings at the moment. This one's from Chris, who went limitless, one of the most powerful, if not arguably the most powerful chip in our arsenal throughout the season. Triple disqualification. Can also confirm that his transfers before using the limitless do get reversed, so not only did he get punished with the limitless chip, his budget probably took a bit of a swipe as well. Deep Dive Golf. Maybe we'll be looking for a golf fantasy game after this, because he also went limitless, triple Ferrari disqualification, went from 1st to 7th in his mini league. Also goes to the trouble of engraving a trophy every year for the winner of his family and friends league. Maybe he won't be engraving his own name for this season. He says limitless burned, may just rage quit. And the final limitless submission this week is from Moose, 222 points. Just submits with the skull face. Team is dead. Limitless. Dead. Another one from Tom here. 58 pointer. 2 times on Charles Leclerc. And the double disqualification for the Ferraris. Developers, we thank you for this experience. Crow91 says, a friend of mine in our home league, that's 2 weeks he has combined minus 10 points now. That's 2 race weeks. His season total is minus 10. And the last couple here, we got Maxi Enjoy here. Minus 14, Max says. My worst result ever. It can't be worse than this, right? That's with the Leclerc 2 times, the Alonso DNF and Ferrari double disqualification. Lenfaz has come in the replies though, saying minus 23. She did better than me. And that minus 23 was then shared with us details to suffer even more. 2 times on the disqualified Charles Leclerc. Minus 8 for the disqualified Pierre Gasly. Minus 23 for the disqualified Ferrari. Minus 6 for the disqualified Alpine. Top scorer of the weekend, 20 points to the Haas driver, Ollie Behrman. Developers, we salute you for this experience. Right then, let's get on to the more serious discussion of team selection in Japan. Although I say the more serious discussion, the truth is the disqualifications do need to be talked about. The disqualifications and the DNF penalty kind of lumped together as a huge negative score. Why? I'm just going to take a minute just to voice my thoughts on this, because I'm sure I haven't spoken about this enough, clearly. But I just can't get my head around. I honestly can't get my head around the thinking of the developers to punish the player base so severely with minus whatever it's 30 for the constructor and then a minus 20 for the driver. Why for something, particularly the DSQ, but also the DNF to a large extent, why for something that's so unpredictable, nigh on impossible, if not actually impossible, particularly the DSQs? I mean, who going into China would have thought, oh, there's a chance that Ferrari might get DSQ here, I'm not going to go with them, or, oh, Pierre Gasly, don't know, could get a DSQ, I'm not going to put him on my team. They've got to take that factor into account when picking my team. No one. It's just impossible. So why the developers give us such huge negative scores. Bear in mind that someone like Gasly, if he scores 10 points in an average weekend, that 10 points is enormous. That's phenomenal. That's great for someone of his budget, his price. So why is the negative for something that's unpredictable so severe in comparison? So we're trying to make a game or play a game where we think that, try and predict who scores the most points. Okay, if I think Gasly's going to score 10 points, then great. Or 20 points even, like he did in China, whatever it was. I think it was 20, 21 points where he got the DQ. Then that's how we should be playing the game, how our assets are going to gain points. And I would feel quite chuffed that Gasly got to 20 points if I was to put him in my team. But instead he gets the DQ, which is something that's completely out of our control. It's completely out of our scope of taking into account for our team selection. We just can't predict that. So why we're getting such heavy, massive penalties for a DQ and even for a DNF. Again, who could have predicted that Alonso's brakes were going to set on fire? Or didn't think of that one, did you? Have a minus 20, and don't forget the minus 0.6 million on top of that. I'm sorry about the rant, but the developers do my head in. They do my head in, and they've got the opportunity. It's in the palm of their hands to just, they could. Right, give me a second. Let me bring up Paint just to demonstrate how we can do this. Let's move this over here. You can all see I got Paint. This is what the developers can do, okay? This is what it says for the DNF, okay? They could do that. There you go. I've done your job for you, developers. I've done your job. The DNFs go from that to that. Let's have a look at the DQs for the constructor. Let's, again, just kind of that, or even just not applicable. You just don't score any points for them if they get DQ'd. Why are we getting punished? Don't know. Why are we getting punished? Don't know. We're all just masochists, and the developers are sadists, and we all love pain, apparently. Rant over. Let's get back to, let's just move that off the screen. Let's get back onto Japan. I ranted enough, but this is something that's obviously very dear to my heart because it's a game that I spend probably way too much time thinking about and trying to pick optimal teams and getting punished. I mean, I didn't even get punished. If anything, I actually got rewarded. Oh my God, the rant's carrying on. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't even get punished in China. My team did better. It got more points and potentially even more budget because of those disqualifications. So this isn't because I'm salty about getting hit by a DQ. I didn't. I got rewarded, if anything. But it's so wrong to be so massively rewarded. I feel like I've basically cheated because other people have been hit so hard for a decision that was not their fault. So developers, I know you just don't want to listen to us for whatever reason, but if you ever catch wind of this, then please, for the love of God, reduce those penalties. Thank you. Right, team selection, Japan. Let's actually talk serious now because I'm starting to rant. Right, so Japan, team selection. This is the track. It's fast. It's tight. There's some chance of DNF. Although I say the chance of DNF, it's got the green rating on the VSC and safety car because since the safety car was introduced back in the 90s, it's only appeared, VSC or safety cars only appeared 43% of the time, which gives it a nice green rating. So it's actually historically quite a safe track. However, the last 3 years and last 3 years of this regulations, my God, I get my words out. I'm still like seething about the DSQs. The last 3 years, there's actually quite a high number of DNFs, 2, 5, and then 3 last year. So maybe it's to do with like the fact that the cars are just really big at the moment and there's just more chance for collisions. And like I said, this is quite a tight track. There's not a lot of room for overtaking. There's not a lot of room for overtaking just in general. 14th gives it the amber on the across the tracks across the calendar. There's not a lot of good opportunities. You've got this, straight into turn 1. That's not the, you do sometimes see some overtakes down there. And then where sector 2 joins sector 3, coming that sort of back straight, you sometimes see overtakes down there. But even then, there's like that bend in the road, so it makes it a bit more tricky to overtake as well. Overtaking is tricky. You sometimes even see people go through those S's down there, trying to overtake through there. And there's gravel either side of it. It's risky. We see people go up in the gravel, get beached in there, and that's it. You're done. DNF, minus 20, minus 0.6. Still salty. But no, this track is... It should be a safe track, but I'm leaning to more thinking it's actually a bit more of a risky track, particularly as there's just I'm still a week out, but there's just a chance that there possibly some rain on race day, just because why not throw in a bit of rain for a laugh and had a few more DNFs and a few more negative scores. Oh God, I feel exasperated, but yeah. basically, yeah, my point is that this is an exciting track. I am excited to go to Suzuka. Well, I'm not going there myself. I would love to go there, but I'm not. It is very high speed. Like I say, you got this kind of sweep in turn one, turn two into these S's. Like I say, gravel trap either side. Bit risky through there, particularly liable to collisions on turn one through that first sector. And then it kind of, again, doesn't really open up any further through turns 8, 9 into that hairpin. And it kind of remains tight throughout the rest of the rest of the track. So yeah, certainly an interesting track and one of the drivers' favourites and one of probably the fan favourites as well. So what we're expecting around here, I'm expecting once again for McLaren to kind of be dominant. I think it's a track that again should suit them. Another team which again may well suit would be the likes of Red Bull. I think Verstappen particularly is very good around here, and the fact that it is such a high speed circuit and Red Bull have been pushing their noses ahead of most other teams in the high speed areas, high speed corners of recent times. I think Red Bull could also be a factor here, but for me personally they're not really a factor because I just can't get them in my team. It's just not feasible for what I'm trying to do. My focus is on trying to build budget as well as trying to balance out with points. I guess the first thing to talk about is kind of Tsunoda Lawson. I'm not going to go into great detail about whether I agree or disagree. I will say, basically, I don't think it's very nice what they've done to Liam Lawson, but it's, at the end of the day, it's their decision. I hope Tsunoda can, can do something good with that RB21 that all the other drivers in recent years haven't been able to do apart from Max Verstappen himself. Because I do think Tsunoda's a good driver, and if anyone can handle that car, maybe it's him. But what does it mean for our fantasy teams? It means for me personally, I own Tsunoda, and anyone else that owns Tsunoda or Liam Lawson will be having to make a transfer this week with that asset. So I will have to get rid of Tsunoda. Otherwise, I'm going to get hit with the non-classified penalty. I don't want a big chunk of negative points. Neither do you. Let's face it, we don't need more violins. There'll probably be some violins next week for someone that forgot to transfer out Tsunoda and it gives them negative points. But yeah, Tsunoda's now switched up to this 16.8 million asset. Doesn't have a pitch yet because the developers just didn't have time. 8 hours of downtime maintenance today just wasn't enough time to get the Yuki Tsunoda picture on there. Just the developers are too busy just improving the game in many other ways. Yes, so anyway, the Tsunoda will have to go for me. And for me personally, my team, I am probably just going to do the very simple swip of Behrman because it helps get me likely points because Behrman's likely to go up in price. And talking of going up in price, let's have a quick look at the budget build. I was actually just looking at the top 500 Patreon. You can see the large bulk of top 500 Patreon on this kind of McLaren Williams build. Mercedes are the next big thing. I'm sure McLaren Mercedes are going to become template pretty soon, but in able to get decent teams to get to that stage, we need to get some more budget because I can actually flick back 2 seconds. I can actually afford if we just get rid of a few people, I can afford constructors. I can afford to get the Mercedes in here now, but I can only do it at the expense of cutting down and getting like all these cheap drivers basically. So I'm well within 1.7 million. I can easily afford this. So I'm not like desperately trying to get to this team right now because the budget situation would be dire. I'd have to like lose a ton of money and we can probably scrape up. Yeah, I can scrape up to like a Hulkenberg, so I don't have to completely destroy my budget. But I don't want to bring in all these guys that's going to lose loads and loads of budget coming out of the other side of Japan because they're still sitting on those DNFs from race week 1. So yeah, although I think this is going to be kind of the template in a few races time, or even potentially the race after Japan, I think a lot of people will be moving to this build, and that's kind of what I want to set myself up for. I don't want to move to it yet because it just means minus 10s to make the transfers, and also means I'm going to just set myself up for budget loss, so it kind of undoes all the good work my wildcard did. So you can see my team too is kind of set on this because this is what I started for the beginning of the season. I had Russell in here, then I got enough budget to move up to Piastri. So team 2, I'm just kind of bulking out the points as much as I can to see how much that impacts things. But my team 1, I'm much more aware of my budget and how that might impact me. I say further down the season, I think fairly imminently down the season, because if we can get our teams to grow in budget, like if we can keep capitalizing on these 0.6 risers, then we're effectively gaining like a couple of million every week. If we're gaining like 2 million on average every week, we're very quickly going to get to, I say very quickly, but in just a few races, quite realistically, like right now, I've got like a bunch of fairly expensive B tier assets, I would argue, reasonably expensive compared to the dregs down the bottom. I've got 9 million in the bank. The next like big asset to get to is someone like an Antonelli or a Russell. So they're about 10 to 11 million out of my price range at the moment. But if we're careful and we're gaining those 0.6 every week, then I think there'll be a position soon that we can jump onto someone like a Russell in this slot next to Piastri here and have a team which just is a lot better than anyone's team that isn't paying attention closely to the budget. That's why I went to this kind of wildcard team to focus on budget early on as soon as possible. And the fact that the pricing algorithm, although we don't know exactly how it works, we got a pretty good idea, and F1 Fancy Tools did a great article actually explaining what they think is the current situation. If you haven't checked it out already, then go check out their Twitter post from earlier today. But yes, basically the bottom line is that we're going to see chunks of these drivers are going to take chunks at a time of gaining value, and if they take like a DNF, they're going to go like 2-3 races of losing value. So it's all about jumping on and off these drivers, particularly these B tier assets, to get as much value as we can to get to these bigger, better teams. One other thing to focus on, actually, I can bring it up from their article. So this is from the F1 Fancy Tools article where they put what they think the current algorithm is onto last year's results to show what had happened across the season to the results for all the drivers and constructors. The thing that really stands out to me in this image is the A-tier assets, the constructors. If we look down here, Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes, they are the A-tier assets from last year. They're the biggest, best A-tier assets from this year. With this year's pricing algorithm, how we think it works, put on top of last year's results, we can see very, very consistent 0.3 gains, almost 100% of the time. It's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times out of all these instances that there wasn't a 0.3 rise. So again, getting to that McLaren Mercedes dream team constructor looks ideal because you're basically just guaranteed a 0.6 rise between the two of them every week. Whereas you look at the B tier assets, a lot more volatile. They're a little bit more susceptible to DNFs and getting scraps in the midfield. The A tier assets are a bit more like out on their own, kind of running their own race and out of trouble. These B tiers are scrapping for every point. They're so desperate for every point, and we see them just maybe slightly more risk of the DNF. And we can see these chunks where minus 0.6s followed by chunks of rises of 0.6s. So we're going to see a lot more volatility with the B tiers. So just to be careful. So as soon as at the moment, my current plan is as soon as I'm able to reasonably move on to a McLaren Mercedes build where it doesn't affect my budget and my driver assets, then I want to get onto that, because just pretty much banking yourself a guaranteed 0.3 is where you want to be. The only reason like Ferrari, the only reason that you wouldn't get that 0.3 if something like Ferrari, the double disqualification from China happened, and you would likely lose the money. But 90+% of the time you just bank in 0.3, whereas these B tiers are a bit more volatile. And it's similar sort of story to the drivers, not quite to the same consistency of the 0.3 rises. The drivers find it a bit more difficult because the game point scoring system is weighted so heavily to the constructors. But again, we see these B tier assets down the bottom here, these kind of dregs of the assets just getting absolutely hammered for budget. Absolutely hammered for budget. Look at Albon at the beginning of the season. He would have gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 races of consistently losing. That's 6 million drop, like straight off the bat. 10 races in, you've lost 6 million if you didn't transfer out Albon. This is the sort of situation, obviously an extreme example, but this is the situation we find ourselves in. We have to jump off. This is why, a lot of us wildcarded in race week 2 to jump off all those assets that DNF'd in Australia, and why going forward, if one of my assets DNF, I'm possibly even looking to take an aggressive minus 10 points to ship them off, because otherwise I'm just sucking up 1.8 million loss across the 3 weeks going past that. So like I say, we don't know with 100% certainty yet, but we're getting closer and closer to the absolute truth. And the F1 Fancy Tools guys are doing a fantastic job at cracking this and sharing their information with us. So do check them out. So my thinking is build budget. Let's go back to the team. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Why is this being weird? There we go. Got it back here. So let's have a look at the budget builder. Again, this is from F1 Fancy Tools. And what points everyone needs to score those big points, big budget gains. Sorry, I feel like I'm still flustered from my DSQ talk from earlier. So this page shows us what the assets need to gain price and what they need to avoid price drops, basically. So that's why we're quickly seeing this template of McLaren and Williams, because Williams only need 13 points. I say only. That's definitely doable. That's very doable. But it's no guarantee on a non-sprint weekend. So it does make me a a little bit jittery as a Williams owner. I'd much rather have Has because, here at minus 31, it's a lot easier for Has owners to get that near enough guaranteed 0.6 rise compared to a Williams owner. But transfers are important. I don't want to just be spending willy-nilly minus 10s going forward. So I would like to have the Has, and because they're more of a guarantee for their price gain this week. But I think to save a free transfer, have a 3 transfer to roll into next week, I think I'd like to be in that situation, but I will consider dropping the Williams. And then you've got the highly owned assets from all of us engaged managers, your Ocon, Gistrolls, Behrman and Hulkenberg, etc. They need quite a low amount of points to get more rises. Your Ocon, -2. He only needs -2. Ocon can score -2 and he goes up 0.6. It's kind of crazy. So yeah, if you've got Ocon, hold him. If you don't have Ocon, bring him in. Same sort of story for Stroll and Behrman. Hulkenberg, similar sort of story. Everyone else past that, not that likely to get big rises here. Particularly now Tsunoda, who's changed his price. He's now got a massive jump of 21 points required. Yeah, he needs to score at least 10 points just to avoid, or 11 points rather, just to avoid the -0.6. So, yeah, it's pretty slim pickings for our cheap drivers here. We're all kind of basically forced into the same lineup. This pricing algorithm is basically forcing anyone who's engaged and aware of what's going on to just pick the same B tier assets, because otherwise you just get slapped for budget. That's basically what's happening. We're getting forced into this template by the developers. Other popular A tier assets, lots of people running Norris, lots of people running Piastri. A few people going down this sort of Antonelli route because they thought they were going to get the bigger price gain for Antonelli, but it turns out 20 million is not the cutoff for A tiers. It looks like it might be around 19 million. So Antonelli is now an A tier asset. So if you've got him in your team and you're hoping he's going to get another 0.6, that's just not going to happen. And even if he has a bad race and drops 0.3, he then is sat on 19 million, and then he's probably still not very likely to go back up again. So yeah, Antonelli for me is like, not really ideal asset to have at the moment. I don't have him, and I'm glad I don't have him. I don't really want him going forward, particularly now he's an A tier. He got very lucky with the driver of the day, absolutely bizarre. I'm not going to start another rant in this video. I've done enough ranting, but driver of the day is another reason this game frustrates me. But yeah, the fact that he got driver of the day pushed him up quite considerably last week. But for me personally, not someone I want to own. But yeah, in general, the Norris and the Piastri. So you have Piastri, who I currently own at 28 points to get that big rise. That's quite chunky, but to be honest, I think he very easily, as long as he doesn't DNF, he'll very easily get this 8 points. So he'll still get that rise and avoid a drop. That's kind of all you can really ask for. Norris obviously more ideal in terms of the price, but I think Piastri being so much cheaper, it's just, the fact that I've made my bed with this kind of team structure of the wild card, I'm more than happy to hold Piastri, and I think he's very capable of scoring more than 28 points anyway. So for me personally, my team selection, like I say, is very easy at the moment. I kind of just want to do Behrman in for the inactive Tsunoda, and everything I'm considering is using my second transfer to bring in Has to closely guarantee, near enough guarantee. There's no actual guarantees at the moment because we don't know with absolute certainty the pricing algorithm, but going triple Has, it looks horrible. It looks horrendous, actually. It looks absolutely revolting, all this grey in here, but I will seriously consider this because of the price gain potential, basically. But I'd rather hold on to Williams, and I hope Williams look decent in the practice sessions to get me through this, and just have 3 transfers going out the other side of Japan, and then I can potentially move off, particularly if anyone DNFs or whatever, then I can potentially move off a couple of these guys, bring in the Mercedes, and then by that time, the likes of Bortoleto and Hajar doing whatever, they would have shaken off their minus 20 points from Australia, which means they're much more easy to gain price. I can't afford them right now, but they're likely to drop again this week, so next week I will, and then maybe coming out of China, I will be able to afford this team with still maintaining that budget gaining potential. I'm not 100% sure I'll move to this at the moment because Bortoleto and Hajar, etc., although they would have shaken off that DNF from Australia, they're still not that likely to keep gaining budget, so I will pause for thought at least and maybe keep growing my budget further with the likes of Williams or Has, but that's for another week. Right now, I'm going to focus on what I've got in front of me, and that is this, and my move is very, very kind of easy because of the pricing algorithm, because of the fact that I have an inactive driver. It's quite easy, just put Behrman in there, and I'll be happy with all these other assets who should gain me price. Like I say, Williams are the only kind of question mark for me in terms of price gains, but I'm still kind of happy to have them in there. So that summarises my team. The only other thing I'd sort of throw out there is that I was, I guess, fortunate because I moved away from this Ferrari Mercedes build. Let me just get rid of Piastri for a minute. Just to this is like what a lot of people had going into last week. This is what my team one looked like coming out of Australia. This Ferrari Mercedes build with Piastri as a 2 times, and I think this point scoring wise was perfectly viable. And if I hadn't been hit so heavily by the DNFs in Australia, I probably would have stuck with this, but I had to wildcard away from it, which pushed me into the McLaren Williams route, which obviously dodged me the disqualifications. If you're sat here with the Piastri on top of Mercedes Ferrari build or something similar to that, I think you kind of have to move away from it. You could potentially look at moving to Red Bull, because I think you have to move away from Ferrari because they're just going to drop value most likely. They're very likely to drop more value, and you just don't want that at this stage of the season. They are incidentally apparently bringing a new floor, is what I've seen in the latest rumor, to Japan. So maybe they'll be improved there, but who knows if that floor is going to be high enough off the ground. Maybe it would be another DSQ, and you'll just be crying even more. So yeah, if I was a Ferrari owner, I would very, very seriously be considering just getting rid of them. Maybe bringing in Red Bull and going with a team like this, because I think Red Bull should be strong here. With Yuki Tsunoda in there as well, it's certainly interesting. But yeah, the other option is, again, like using your wild card and shifting into this kind of more template where you're just kind of balancing the point scoring of the McLaren and balancing it out with someone like a Haas. I think this is kind of the template. It might only be like a 2-week template whilst we then probably jump onto Mercedes. That's what I think's going to happen. There will be some people that want to keep pushing budget and getting these 0.6 rises. At the moment, I'm leaning more towards when I can safely move on to a McLaren Mercedes build. That's kind of what I'm looking at. But yeah, if you're not on the McLaren budget builder, constructor enabler, then I think a lot of people will be moving towards that. The alternative, like I say, is having someone like Red Bull in here to pair with Mercedes, and I think that's still fine. I think Mercedes are very good. They've scored really, really strongly in the first couple of weekends, and that's with Antonelli not doing especially great. He's done pretty good, and he has impressed, but he hasn't like threatened the podium or anything. But yeah, I do think that he gives me a lot of confidence, to be honest. And Russell has just been a very consistent driver for quite a while now, actually. He's kind of gone under the radar a little bit, but he's actually he is just a very good driver, quite clearly. So I think back in the Mercedes is a great way to go. But yeah, for me personally, like I say, I'm going to sit here on this team one, Tsunoda out for Behrman. Those are my thoughts at the moment. The other two teams, again, I'm probably not going to change too much as well in my team 2 or team 3. This team 2 will just continue to pump away the McLaren Mercedes Piastri build and see where it gets me, and just kind of make my bed with the fact that I've lost a load of budget with Bortoleto and Hajar, and hope they can claw it back at some point in the season, and then maybe move on from that. But yeah, those are kind of my thoughts and feelings. Going into Japan, like I say, I'm still kind of like a week out at this point, so things may change. Maybe some more news will drop. This that, and the other. Get a bit more of an accurate weather update. Like I say, a few weather websites. My God, I can speak. I promise. That I've looked at so far have indicated fairly cool conditions and a small chance of rain on the Sunday. So like sun and maybe some rain, but this is like a week out from that. So we'll see with some more certainty coming up. So yeah, thanks very much for listening to me as always. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I want to say sorry for the rant, but I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry for ranting earlier. It's been on my mind. We spend a lot of time and energy on this game, and it affects us. When you get hit by stuff that's completely out of your control, and I know everything is out of our control, but it is in our control when trying to make predictions before the deadline. So what isn't in our control in that sense is the likes of DNF and DSQs. Like, they're just horrible. So my heart generally does go out to everyone that's been affected by the disqualifications. And I know people will call me over dramatic or whatever, but it does affect people, and it's affected me many times. I think Dakota 2023, and I'm still having when I see my Lewis Hamilton 2 times driver on -8 points down from 18 the night before when I went to bed, a happy man. But yeah, so these things do affect us. If you've been affected, then honestly, I genuinely feel sorry for you, and I hope you can pick yourself up for the next race. So let's stick together, guys, and let's try and crack the code as we move forward in this fantasy season. So yeah, see you in a few days' time for some further thoughts. Probably final thoughts video on the Friday. So yeah, thanks for listening to me, and catch you soon. Bye for now.